Joining us from New York, trial attorney Nick Fortuna, and in Washington, Hans von Spakovsky, a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation and a former Justice Department official. Hans, let me start with you in Washington. It is difficult to see this not as an assault on the Mueller-Russia probe. A day after the election, President Trump ousting the Attorney General, someone, as we just heard, he has frequently criticized for recusing himself, choosing not to give Rod Rosenstein that position, but rather to appoint Matthew Whitaker, who has been vocally against the Russia probe. Your take on the decision and how it was done?
Well, I don't think it's any surprise, as everyone has said, that the president was unhappy about this, and so it's no surprise that Sessions resigned. But I think anybody who thinks that the new acting Assistant Attorney General is going to somehow suddenly dismiss the lawsuit doesn't know what they're talking about. He is an experienced United States attorney with a great record, and he's not going to do anything unethical or unprofessional. He may take a look at what exactly Mueller is doing to make sure that Mueller, one, is staying within the parameters of the charge that he was given when he was assigned. And I also expect that he's going to take a look at all the documents that have been withheld from the congressional investigations to see whether or not those documents really should be turned over. But anybody who expects some sudden change, I think, is going to be disappointed.
Well, Nick, congressional Democrats are calling for immediate hearings in the House of Representatives, but you just heard Hans. The president has the right to change the attorney general. The new AG has the right to make himself familiar with the investigation. What is there to investigate here?
Well, they're going to look at why he changed the attorney general, what the conversations were between Trump and Whitaker, which is Matthew Whitaker is now the acting attorney general. They want to see if it supports obstruction of justice charges, if there's any kind of quid pro quo in asking him to be the acting attorney general in exchange for putting some pressure on the Mueller investigation, whether or not to terminate it or to reduce the amount of funds or cut off funds for the Mueller investigation. I do agree with Hans, though. It would be very difficult for him to just out-and-out stop the investigation. Under the regulation where Mueller was appointed, the only way to dismiss him is for misconduct or something unethical, and there's no indication of that at this point. So I think it would be difficult for him to substantially stop the investigation in its tracks at this point.
Hans, the president does have the right to change his attorney general, but his state of mind here is a factor. We have heard him talk about his trying to block this Russia probe. Is there a case possibly for obstruction of justice in this act when it's combined with other actions that the president has taken?
No, there isn't. The president can't be charged with obstruction of justice for engaging in his constitutional authority. And his constitutional authority is that he can nominate and appoint whoever he wants to be the head of the Justice Department. Also, everyone should keep in mind that it's the long-held opinion of the U.S. Justice Department, and this has been under both Democratic and Republican administrations, that a sitting president cannot be criminally indicted or charged. The solution that the Constitution provides if a president is believed to have acted unlawfully is the impeachment process. But he can't be criminally charged, he can't be criminally indicted, and the current special prosecutor under the charging regulations of the Justice Department has to follow Justice Department policies and procedures, and that's long been the policy of the Justice Department.
So, Nick, you are both saying that you don't expect Acting Attorney General Whitaker to take any sort of brash action over the probe, but he does have significant authority as it stands. He can essentially determine the budget, the jurisdiction. He can even, if I understand correctly, prevent Robert Mueller from issuing a subpoena to the president. So at what point in your eyes is it a sort of potential red flag?
Well, I agree with you. He does have a lot of power over the investigation, but there are counters to that. There's nothing that prevents Robert Mueller from going public with his findings if the investigations terminated, or funds are cut off to him, or they prevent him from further investigating the president. He could go public. He could be called to testify at Congress. The Democrats are taking over the House in January, so he could be called and give his findings at that time. So they have to be careful. They can't fully control what Mueller knows and prevent it from becoming public. So doing that, I think, would be a mistake, both politically and strategically. That's why I don't think it'll be terminated in such a rash way. Also, I kind of disagree that the appointment of Matthew Whitaker doesn't help the case or doesn't suggest obstruction of justice. That alone, I agree, is not criminal. But of all the things that Trump has said publicly about the Attorney General, seeking to have him prosecute or investigate his political adversaries, trying to use the Justice Department, which is supposed to be an independent agency, independent from the executive branch, for political purposes, this would suggest having someone with such a close relationship, someone who wasn't confirmed by the Senate, to take over the investigation might be problematic for the president.
And some of the reporting out there today describes Trump allies as deeply perplexed by this move now against Sessions, assuming that it will sort of all but guarantee an investigation by the House Judiciary. Do you think that that is a fair criticism, a fair question of what Trump is doing now, and how likely do you think that kind of investigation is?
Oh, I think the Democrats clearly announced that they were going to use their investigative powers against the administration no matter what. Even if Sessions had remained in office, they would be using that, using their new powers for that purpose. Look, I think what the president wanted is this to be in the hands of the Attorney General's office. Under the statute, under the regulations of the Justice Department, it is supposed to be the Attorney General who supervises and monitors the special counsel. And I don't think they have a lot of confidence in Rod Rosenstein and the way he's handled it. I mean, just to give you one example, I think Rod Rosenstein now has clearly had a conflict of interest that he hasn't done anything about. Because remember, very serious questions have been raised about whether or not the FBI and the DOJ, Department of Justice, actually had evidence on which to base their application for a electronic surveillance warrant. And the person who signed the renewals of those applications to the FISA court was Rod Rosenstein.
I want to give Nick a chance to respond to that, because Republicans have hammered on the legitimacy of the FISA warrants. Nick, is that a political attack, or is there some legitimate legal argument there?
I think it's a political attack. And also, you know, look at what we're focused on. We're focused on just the Mueller investigation. That's the only reason Jeff Sessions was fired. He put in place a very conservative prosecutorial agenda. He changed the policies of the Justice Department to comply with conservative Republican ideals. There isn't anyone in Republican circles that had a complaint about Jeff Sessions and how he was running the Justice Department. The only reason he was fired and he was being attacked is because of the Mueller investigation. So I think this is all political. It's all Trump trying to protect himself, and the attack on the FISA warrants as well is political.